Hello! Welcome back to Choose Your Crown Part 9 The Hidden History, a supernatural journey through creation, out of the garden, and into eternity. In the last video, I talked about how Sarah is the womb that once was barren and now bursts forth with true inward change. Sarah is representative as Israel finally delivered and free from bondage to sin in the new covenant written on our hearts. Whereas Hagar is the book of the law written in stone to reflect our hearts of stony flesh. There is no inward change to actually break bondage from sin and unrighteousness, only things that must be done. I also gave a little glimpse of a third woman, Mystery Babylon. But we can't quite get into Mystery Babylon yet. We need to uncover a little bit more until we can understand this strange mystery. And the biggest thing about this mystery is that we need to know that not guarding Yahweh's ways leads to our own bondage. Just like in the story of Exodus, as we all know, Exodus 9:1 says, "Then Yahweh said to Moses, Go into Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, Let my people go, that they may serve me." We should all know the story of Exodus and Moses being led by Yahweh to deliver the Israelites from their slavery to the Egyptians, and how prior to that, their area of Goshen is where they had settled thanks to their patriarch Joseph. They had remained in Goshen and so began mixing their ways with that of the Egyptians, while simultaneously becoming in bondage to them. That's the part that we don't always want to consider, is they were settling there and so mixing with their ways, which is kind of what led them into the bondage. And we can even recall how, even as they were being delivered and when they were in the wilderness, they kept thinking about Egypt. They kept wanting to go back to their bondage. So, the thing that places us in bondage is the very fact that we don't want to guard Yahweh's ways, and the inward parts of us do need to be changed. We need to be that born again Israel, not Israel of the flesh. And some of us might know this song, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh baby, let my people go. It's a good one. I really like it. But is it all Pharaoh? Of course, Pharaoh had his heart hardened. Of course, he kept resisting. Of course, he didn't want to let Yahweh's people go. And yes, Yahweh did ultimately let them free. But did the people listen in the end? Or did they still have to go through more struggles? Were they really set free from their bondage? Or was Pharaoh just a result, a means to an end, that they still needed to get delivery from him, but there was still no inward change? Let's keep thinking about these things. But of course, having a firm foundation and understanding Exodus is crucial for building up the context of what leads to bondage. I will even drive the point further that one also needs a strong foundation in Genesis to tie together the full story. One cannot go forth further in their biblical understandings of the Old Testament, all the way up to Revelation, without a deep-seated amount of personal time spent in Genesis and Exodus, and I'll even say the whole Torah. If you want to be somebody who can say they have a really great understanding, then you really need to spend a lot of personal time devoted and studying Torah first. and then have a lot of personal, devoted time spent in the rest of it. So then we can continue to say Torah and comparative mythology can unlock a hidden history. Comparative mythology is the comparison of myths from different cultures to identify shared themes and characteristics. Myths aren't necessarily falsehoods, but rather stories that serve to define the backdrop of the worldview within a distinct group or culture. This does not mean that all myths are the same singular truth. It only serves to say that people write down and share what they know to have happened, and that it shapes their worldview. Every myth can be compared to the biblical narrative, but not all myths have the same perspective as the biblical narrative. The biblical point of view is Yahweh's perspective as the creator and redeemer, while other mythologies oftentimes hold the point of view from the fallen creation and all the twisted events that have occurred to it, coupled with mankind's perspective of trying to understand it. And so far in this series, I have covered the parts of this events timeline that were part of the 7-day creation process. So you might want to go back to all the first videos if you're not familiar with this timeline and see where I've been kind of plugging it in. But now we can continue to fill in other areas, such as the rebellion in heaven. I actually haven't yet touched on that, but I have touched on the primeval chaos of the deep before creation, the formation of the earth and mankind, the ancient serpent of deception and time, and I have not yet gotten to earth filled with giants and violence, and the flood and preservative ark to cleanse the earth, okay? So this is kind of like the hidden history timeline. The timeline that once you kind of understand every event within this timeline, you have a solid foundation in where we are now. So if these events are kind of confusing to you, or you've not spent enough time understanding these events, I just invite you to go ahead and take the time to do that, because it will really help you in these days. And this is the hidden history of heaven and earth overview. These are things that I will be going over. Half of it is in this video, and hopefully the other half will be in the upcoming part, because the hidden history timeline, when we're trying to break it all down, it does take a lot of slides and a lot of information, and it might not even get done in 2 videos, honestly, but I'm going to do my very best. So the overview will be the heavenly sanctuary and assembly. To understand that, we want to understand Yahusha, that Yahusha was chosen to redeem us as a nation before the foundation of the world. That's part of our hidden history. He's always immersed in the hidden history. Yahweh is the only creator Elohim, but he has a divine council that he created as the lower Elohim, or what we know as angels. So he's the only creator Elohim. He was there from the beginning. Yahusha was with him. His Ruach was with him. And everything was pre-planned before anything else was made. But he did then have a divine council of lower created beings, which were the angels. It's all kind of like complex and confusing, but I'm really trying hard to explain it in a way where most people can understand it. Something else about the hidden history of heaven and earth is that the angels long to look into Yahweh's plan of love and redemption, because at the end of the day, that's what all of this is about, is his plan of love and redemption. Also in the hidden history is Hillel was once in the divine council as the reflector of Yahweh's glory over earth. When Hillel sinned, there was then an office of adversary. And adversary is an office and position, and which is something we don't often learn in our traditional Christian teachings. But I'm going to probably give a new perspective on that. And the big question of the hidden history of heaven and earth is Yahweh testing us? What is all of this about? If it is what's going on, right? And then that's what's going to be covered in this video. And then in the upcoming video, I will cover some really strange stuff. So this video might have strange stuff, but the next one will be starting to get really strange. But I've tried to lay a very strong foundation up until now to where the rest of this will make a lot more sense. But hopefully in the upcoming video, I'm going to cover this part of the hidden history of heaven and earth. A group of lower Elohim, or angels, left their positions to mess with the genetics of mankind, utilizing the design of females, possibly motivated by lust, and possibly to look into deeper mysteries of DNA outside of Yahweh's permission. They were not supposed to do this, but they did anyway. Nearly all flesh was corrupted and or filled with violence from not following the set rules of like kind after like kind. Because remember, Yahweh is an Elohim of distinction and order, and he wants like kind to reproduce with like kind. And also, angels were never, ever meant to procreate. So when you start messing up the rules, strange, crazy things start to happen. And we do actually have a lot of historical, mythological evidence of these events when we do a lot of comparative mythology and comparative hidden history. Messing with DNA genetics made literal giants and monsters with unclean, un-Yah created souls. And that's what became the unclean spirits. But we'll get into that later. Noah was the only man that was genetically pure and found to be righteous in those days. So that's what Noah was chosen out to be. And Yahweh sent a flood to destroy all flesh except for that was preserved on the ark. And finally, the last days will be somewhat of a recycling of this scenario, because DNA and genes and the body are the living temple of Yahweh. But he will deliver his people once and for all, because it's all hidden in his holy plan of love and redemption. So let's look into the heavenly sanctuary and assembly. We can find this in Psalms 89, 1 through 7. I will sing of the loving devotion of Yahweh forever. With my mouth I will proclaim your faithfulness to all generations. For I have said, loving devotion is built up forever. In the heavens you establish your faithfulness. You said, I have made a covenant with my chosen one. I have sworn to David my servant. I will establish your offspring forever and build up your throne for all generations. Selah. The heavens praise you, your wonders, O Yahweh, your faithfulness as well, in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies can compare with Yahweh? Who among the heavenly beings is like Yahweh? In the council of the holy ones, Elohim is greatly feared and awesome above all who surround him. So we get to this kind of picture that Yahweh has his throne in the heavens, and he has an assembly or his council, and they are his angels. And it's talking about his faithfulness and his covenant with his chosen one, and we'll get there. His covenant is of old. The covenant and plan that he's had has been since before the foundation of the world. And yeah, I don't know. It's really crazy to think about and try to explain. So I hope these slides can help. It's talking about his loving devotion being built up forever in the heavens. And this has to do with his faithfulness. He wants to be faithful to his own covenant that he's decided to make with a chosen people. And then we also have Psalm 102, 18 through 28. Let this be written for the generation to come, so that a people not yet created may praise Yahweh. For he looked down from the heights of his sanctuary. Yahweh gazed out from heaven to earth, to hear a prisoner's groaning, to release those condemned to death, that they may proclaim in the name of Yahweh in Zion, and praise him in Jerusalem. When peoples and kingdoms assemble to serve Yahweh, he has broken my strength on the way. He has cut short my days. I say, oh my Elohim, do not take me in the midst of my days. Your years go on through all generations. In the beginning you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like clothing you will change them, and they will be passed on. But you remain the same, and your years will never end. The children of your servants will dwell securely, and their descendants will be established before you. So here's another picture of him in his sanctuary, wanting to deliver a people from their condemnation to death. And that he wants to make everything new so that he can be with these chosen people forever. Before the foundation of the world. Ephesians 1, 3 through 8. Blessed be the Elohim and Father of our Master Yahushua HaMashiach, who has blessed us in Messiah with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms. For he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, to be holy and blameless in his presence. In love he predestined us for adoption as his sons, through Yahushua HaMashiach, according to the good pleasure of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the Beloved One. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses according to the riches of his grace, that he lavished on us with all wisdom and understanding. And he has made known to us the mystery of his will according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in Messiah, as a plan for the fullness of time, to bring all things in heaven and on earth together in Messiah. And something that I just recently heard from a channel called The Donkey Speaks, and it's actually really crazy because I only discovered that channel this previous week, and it's like we have the same mind, which I know it's not that shocking if you're both like studying the Bible and thinking about these topics, but the way that he sets up his channel and the way he's been putting out his videos and the slides he makes are so similar to mine And the way he thinks about these things, I don't know, it was crazy. So then I started listening to him because his ideas are kind of tying my ideas together where I had a few loose ends. Anyway, you should go check out the Donkey Speaks if you like my content, and go check out his content too. But anyway, I just noticed this part. It says in verse 10, the plan for the fullness of time. And something that he said that kind of struck me was, we don't have to be old earthers or new earthers. What we need to focus on is that the fullness of time has to do with the 7,000 year redemption plan. The earth could be older. Or it could be exactly, 6,000 years old or so, but that's not the argument. The argument is supposed to be that the fullness of time, the 7,000 year plan, is what we need to be looking at in context of the time that we understand the earth to be, in context of our history, in context of time. So the argument isn't how old per se the earth is, but how old is the redemption plan and the fullness of time, because they're not always necessarily the same thing. Anyway, but yeah, to bring all things in heaven and on earth together in Messiah. So, as usual, I'm always trying to tie in all these topics, and I can't help but to tie in my eye, earth, womb model, the tree of life model, right? I always gotta throw that in here. But anyway, so yeah, so to bring all things in heaven and on earth together in Messiah. And this was a plan before the foundation of the world. And so, I want to use the right term here. I think I want to say electromagnetism. In electromagnetism, the second picture I have here, a torus field can actually be created. And I don't know all the specific terms of the lines they have drawn out, but it is kind of like two vortexes meeting together, like heaven and earth, where they kind of meet together. So it kind of fit my tree of life model that I like to use, and the eye earth womb model. And I hope you can see how all of these pictures kind of relate to each other in terms of like the design of the earth. But anyway, I like to drive in the point that in terms of heaven, it's above, directly above the waters, the Shamayim, and the earth is below with a firmament below the waters, and the stars and whatnot are either fixed in the firmament, like the actual firmament, or somehow in the waters. Not sure exactly how it works. I have a lot of ideas, but these models do seem to relate to each other and link into each other and give good visuals for explaining it. But of course, it's always about Yahweh bringing his heavenly kingdom, his righteous kingdom to earth. And it all reigning as one entire kingdom and inheritance. And there's actually quite a few verses that talk about this all being before the foundation of the world. If you want to go onto Bible Hub and just type in the term before the foundation of the world, they'll all come up. So 1 Peter 1:12-21, it says this: It was revealed to them, the prophets, that they were not serving themselves but you, when they foretold the things now announced by those who preach the gospel to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven. Even angels long to look into these things. Therefore, prepare your minds for action. Be sober-minded. Set your hope fully on the grace to be given you at the revelation of Yahushua HaMashiach. Which, by the way, is speaking about revelation, right? Because revelation means the revealing. So the revealing of his redemption plan, right? As obedient children, do not conform to the passions of your former ignorance, but just as you who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, Be holy because I am holy. And that's from Leviticus 19:2, where he says, Be holy because I am holy. That still stands. Since you call on a Father who judges each one's work impartially, conduct yourselves in reverent fear during your stay as foreigners. For you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life you inherited from your forefathers, but with the precious blood of Messiah, a lamb without blemish or spot. He was known before the foundation of the world, but was revealed, his revealing, right, in the last times for your sake. Through him you believe in Elohim, who raised him from the dead and glorified him. And so your faith and hope are in Elohim. Right, and this is ultimately about preparing our hearts because he's our bridegroom, right? The whole idea of the revelation, his revealing, his redemption plan, the thing that the angels long to look into, has to do with us humans. He made us specifically for this, if only we choose him. And so we must be set apart as a people and set apart to our first love. He's supposed to be our first love. Yahusha and his father is Yahweh. You know, let's love him. And through his son, Yahusha, who is the Messiah, and have his name be on our forehead, like it says in Revelation, and prepare our hearts for our bridegroom, Yahusha. And be sober-minded, right? Like Peter's trying to say. It's important because if we're sober-minded and thinking on these things, he's going to give us more information and more revealing through his Holy Spirit on what's coming and what we are supposed to be prepared to do. And no, it's not about doomsday for us. I used to be somebody who thought that way, but this year I feel a lot different. I feel like he has something amazing planned for those who love him. And I don't know. We'll see where everything goes. Before the foundation of the world, here's more on that. Matthew 25:34. Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, You who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. And the kingdom prepared for us from the foundation of the world is the righteous kingdom, the Melchizedek kingdom. It was prepared for Israel from the foundation of the world. The everlasting kingdom was sown through the seed of Yahusha as the blueprint for everything. Foundation in Greek is katabole, and can mean, it literally means the depositing, sowing, or conception of something. And I have a slide for that here in a moment. And in Genesis 13:14, it says, After Lot had departed, Yahweh said to Abram at that time, Now lift up your eyes from the place where you are, and look to the north and south and east and west, for all the land that you see, I will give to you and to your seed forever. And then in Galatians 3:15 through 16, we get to see who that seed is. Brothers, let me put this in human terms. Even a human covenant, once it is ratified, cannot be canceled or amended. The promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. The scripture does not say and to seeds, plural, meaning many, but and to your seed, meaning one, who is Messiah. So when that promise was made to Abram in Genesis 13:14, it was seed singular, speaking of Messiah, because it's all about the covenant that was to come and the prepared kingdom, and all of it was planned. And here's a really great picture that I found. Now, I don't necessarily believe in all of the theories when it comes to the electric universe model, but I am kind of learning about it right now, and I'm just grabbing the parts that do fit into scripture, because there are some parts of the electric universe model that do fit, and they kick the whole Big Bang Theory in the butt, because I was never into that one. And I am a creationist, and I am into the whole geocentric firmament model, but I'm also kind of picking some things from the electric universe model in terms of how they talk about the stars being sort of like plasma and things like that. I don't know. I'm still learning about it, but if any more of it ties into any of these presentations, you might start to see it here. But anyway, this was a picture that I grabbed from somebody who does information on the electric universe model. And it looked to me just like an egg during conception. And I was like, oh wow, that is kind of like, that makes way more sense than the Big Bang Theory, right? Especially in terms of this, where the foundation of the world is a depositing or a conception that occurred. That makes way more sense. And katabole, here is the Greek definition for foundation in the English. It is a depositing, sowing, deposit, technically used of the act of conception. A foundation, a cast, a blueprint for the design, the substructure which determines the entire direction and destination. Isn't that what a seed does? A seed already contains the whole entire blueprint for what is to grow. The foundation plan, the entire substructure, um, the very beginning. So the divine plan was set and sealed before creation, right? He already wanted to establish a people to know him. So in Matthew 13:35 it says, "Since the foundation of the world." Further in Matthew, "Prepared for you from the foundation of the world." In Luke, "Since the foundation of the world." In John, "Me before the foundation of the world." So we get this a lot, the idea that he was the very blueprint, the plan for everything. Speaking more of this blueprint, we gotta move on in this hidden history, right? And yeah, the Earth does kind of have a lot to do with the hidden history, but I'm not here for debates or arguments, just for ideas. Yahweh challenges Job in Job 38, and this is only a fraction of that challenge. Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this who obscures my counsel by words without knowledge? Now brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall inform me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who fixed its measurements? Surely you know. Or who outstretched a measuring line across it? On what were its foundations set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and the sons of Elohim shouted for joy. Who enclosed the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and thick darkness its blanket, when I fixed its boundaries and set in place its bars and doors, and I declared, you may come this far, but no further. Here your proud waves must stop. In your days have you commanded the morning or assigned the dawn its place, that it might spread to the ends of the earth and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its hills stand out like the folds of a garment. Light is withheld from the wicked, and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the vents of the sea, or walked in the trenches of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you surveyed the extent of the earth? Tell me if you know all of this. So yeah, honestly, if if I were Job, that would have been scary. When I love that story, especially at the end when Yahweh comes in and says all of this amazing stuff. I would have been put in my place, that's for sure. And that was the point of it, right? Job definitely got put in his place. But wow, the imagery here is just amazing. The earth takes shape like clay under a seal, and a few people have already made really great graphics for this. If you know what a seal looks like, when you press clay, it actually has a raised edge around it, which fits the FE model. But I also like to picture also a firmament over it, right? So that part's kind of crucial too. We need to have that firmament over it. But yes, it is like raised around the edges. And I even think it might even be like hilled up in the middle too. So not perfectly flat, but yeah, even Yahweh says its hills stand out like a garment, you know. If you have like a blanket or a piece of fabric and you just like toss it onto the ground, it's not going to land perfectly flat. There's going to be um, parts that go up and down and whatnot, but we know that the blanket itself, if you do spread it out perfectly, it would be flat. You know what I'm saying. But yeah, that's some good imagery there. And also we have the sea bursting forth from the womb. So, like I said before, that goes back into the womb model where the waters, the original waters, the sea came from those original waters, which were like a womb. And the morning stars were his angels that he made to be lower than them. They were created beings. And the cornerstone, which is Yahusha, right? And the foundations, the whole blueprint for it all. It was all for us, all for his people. And Hebrews 10 through 1 through 18, I want to get in here because it's about the shadow pictures, right? Of the book of the law, because it's all about, Yahweh's kingdom being a higher reality. But he needed to make things very plain and laid out in the book of the law. For the law is only a shadow of the good things to come, not the realities themselves. It can never, by the same sacrifices offered year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. If it could, would not the offerings have ceased? For the worshippers would have been cleansed once and for all, and would no longer have felt the guilt of their sins. Instead, those sacrifices are an annual reminder of sins, because it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when Messiah came into the world, he said, "Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you prepared for me. And burnt offerings and sin offerings you took no delight. Then I said, Here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, O Elohim." And that's from Psalm 40. In the passage above, he says, "Sacrifices and offerings, burnt offerings and sin offerings, you did not desire, nor did you delight in them, although they are offered according to the law." Then he adds, "Here I am, I have come to do your will." He takes away the first to establish the second, and by that will we have been sanctified through the sacrifice of the body of Yahushua HaMashiach once and for all. Day after day, every priest stands to minister and to offer again and again the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But when this priest had offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of Elohim. Since that time, he waits for his enemies to be made a footstool for his feet, because by a single offering he has made perfect for all time those who are being sanctified. Right, so we have a group who are his enemies and a group who are being sanctified. And it's all through that same sacrifice. The set-apart Spirit also testifies to us about this. First he says, "This is the covenant I will make with them. After those days, declares the Master, I will put my laws in their hearts and inscribe them on their minds." Jeremiah 31. Then he adds, "Their sins and lawless acts I will remember no more." That's also from Jeremiah 31. "And where these have been forgiven, an offering for sin is no longer needed." So yeah, you could go back and read all of the book of Hebrews. I highly recommend. It's a good one. If you want to understand the Melchizedek priesthood versus the old book of the law a little bit better. But we got to keep moving, right? So all of that was predestined, pre-planned. The blueprint was there, but also we have the corrupt high priest, which we did cover in previous videos, but this is part of the hidden history, so I have to have it here. And we get a little snippet of the corrupt high priest from Ezekiel 28. This is before Yahusha. Yahusha is the greatest high priest, and now he's the eternal high priest. But we know somebody else was also a high priest. The word of Yahweh came to me. Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre, and say to him, This is what the sovereign Yahweh says. You are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You are in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone adorned you, carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald, topaz, onyx, and jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of Elohim. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in the disgrace from the mount of Elohim, and I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made you a spectacle of you before kings. By your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made the fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground. In the sight of all who were watching, all the nations who knew you were appalled at you. You have come to a horrible end, and will be no more. Okay, so the thing about Scripture is some things are multifaceted, right? We have different layers. So yes, this is a lament concerning an actual king who was the king of Babylon, the king of Tyre. But it's also, at the same time, speaking of what we now know as Hasatan, right? When he was Hillel. Okay? And the thing is, we're all given this idea that Hasatan or the devil or Satan or whatever, we're given this idea that he's like some red-horned demon creature, but that's actually far from what he really is and was. He's actually, well, he was a guardian cherub angel, very close to Yahweh. He was perfectly beautiful, and probably when he fell, he still didn't really get ugly. I wouldn't assume. It doesn't say he became ugly by any means. In fact, Paul warns that he disguises himself as an angel of light still, and that he's probably still not a hideous creature. Because he said, and no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. He was talking about workers for Satan. But I think a lot of the issue in today's world is we want to only see the devil as we only want to look at the devil as something that is obviously evil or obviously scary or obviously satanic and dark. But the reality is it's not all obvious. Some things can be beautiful yet deceptive and still against Yahweh. And actually that's the thing about deception, is it takes a lot of truth or a lot of beauty, and then puts a teensy bit of lie in there, puts a teensy bit of ugly in there. So that's actually how we have to think of this corrupted, fallen angel, right? And no, he's not a demon, because that's a different creature entirely. Okay. And anyway, we'll get there later. But also, he's not the ruler of hell. That's also um, something that was synchronized into biblical thinking. He doesn't roll over Sheol at all. He actually rules over the earth, the world currently, and Sheol is just the place of the dead, where the dead rest, and like biblically speaking. Yeah, there's not a horned red fiery looking creature that rolls over hell. That is the myth. That is what we're not supposed to be thinking, because that will actually pull us into deception. But anyway, I'll continue. His covering, I talk about this way more in depth in another video, so you'll have to find that. This is someone else's graphic that I found online, so it's a little different from the one that I made, but I also like it, so I wanted to use it quickly. So his covering had 9 stones, and as we know, the high priest is supposed to have 12 stones. So because he was only given 9, that is what eventually led to his destruction and his pride, because he didn't have all 12 to be the eternal high priest, right? The eternal high priest has all 12. So he was probably predestined to only be temporary and fall, since he was only given 9 stones in the beginning, right? So the 3 that he was missing were Liger, which represents Gad, Agate, which represents Asher, and Amethyst, which represents Issachar. And because he was missing Liger, he didn't have that attribute, which is to troop and overcome, which is Gad's prophecy. Gad, a troop, shall overcome him, but he shall overcome at the last. So Satan cannot overcome. He will never overcome, but he will be overcome by overall Israel, right? Since he's missing Agate. Agate is the yield or royal seed, right? Like Yahusha. And Asher's prophecy in Genesis 49:20 is, out of Asher his bread shall be fat, and he shall yield royal dainties. Which dainties are like pleasure and delight, and Satan will never produce a life pleasing to Yahweh, right? And he's also missing Amethyst, which is representative of Issachar, and that would be a servant, meaning to live for others. And Issachar's prophecy in Genesis 49:14 is, Issachar is a strong ass crouching down between 2 burdens. And Satan will never bear our burdens, right? Who rode on the donkey? Yahusha did. Yeah, because he'll bear our burdens, but Hasatan would never bear our burdens. And I had different definitions for these missing stones, but I think these ones are good too. So that's why I want to include it in this video. And here's another slide on the corrupt high priest, and this is the taunt to the king of Babylon, from Israel to the king of Babylon, where Lucifer or Hillel Ben Shakar, right? Where he says his 5 I wills. Isaiah 14:12 through 15 says, How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn! How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low! You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of Elohim. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Who is this man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? Right? So the actual king of Babylon, he's dead, He's in Sheol, which is the place of the dead, right? That doesn't mean that Hasatan is there, right? Hasatan rules the earth, so we have to be able to look at these prophecies as multi-layered, because the king of Babylon himself also, wanted to raise himself up. But Hasatan thought the same thing, and he was one of the day stars, right? One of the original assembly of Yahweh. And he wanted to raise his throne above the north. And when you have this perspective of the earth, where it's the sealed earth firmament model, the north is actually the very middle part of the face of the circle, right? And it would be the highest part if we're thinking of it as a tree, right? And he wanted to raise himself up above Yahweh's throne and be like the Most High. He wanted to raise himself up above Yahusha, above Yahweh, even though his throne was already on the earth itself. So he got cut down further, right? He's going to lose his position. So I have a picture here, and I really like this picture of this model. It really encapsulates everything that I'm trying to describe, where we have the waters above and below, and the Leviathan-like creature, and the earth under the firmament, and the stars, which are set in the firmament, and then we have the northern throne, and then which is like over earth, and then Yahweh's throne itself. So now let's talk about the office of adversary. And this is something that we all really need to think differently on. If we came from like just a regular Christian worldview, right? The term Satan or adversary in Scripture is used about 54 times. This term is a title of an office or position that opposes, repels, blocks, withstands, or accuses against another position, right? That's all that it means. It's just an office or position that opposes, repels, blocks, withstands, or accuses against another position. Any being, including Yahweh, can take a position as an adversary at times. Like in the story of Balaam's donkey, the angel that stood in the path was repelling or withstanding, right? In 1 Chronicles 21, a lot of people get tripped up on that one. Yahweh is acting as an adversary in that. It's not saying Yahweh is the devil. It's saying he was being an opposing force. And he is allowed to do that. And even in Peter's story, in the New Testament, Peter is called Satan, and that he was offending Yahusha, or blocking him or going against him, right? But it doesn't mean that Peter was possessed. It doesn't mean that Peter was the devil. No, it just means that Peter was taking an opposing position that was against Yahusha. And it was offensive to Yahusha that Peter would think that way. That it's that simple, right? But Hillel itself downgraded from the office of high priest, right, to the office of full-time adversary. To people. Hasatan or Hillel or Lucifer, whatever, is not necessarily Yahweh's adversary. Yahweh doesn't have an adversary. He's already the Most High. He doesn't have anything that's equal to him and opposing to him. Now, he can be opposing to you because he's way above everybody else. But Hillel is the adversary to mankind. And he opposes mankind. He opposes the seed of Yahweh, right? And now when you read your scriptures, these definitions will make sense in your studies if you look at them this way. Being oppositional is not always a bad thing. Like, for example, sometimes I can be oppositional to, let's say, a really good friend. Let's say they have a viewpoint on something, and I just say, no, here's what I think. In that instance, I am taking an oppositional position, but it doesn't have to be a be thing. It could just be me saying, I repel what you have to think. But it doesn't need to be constant. Now, the problem is when it's constant and always. You know, you want to be an agreeable and nice person, but sometimes you do also need to be honest and open, and it's not always a bad thing to be oppositional. That's all I'm saying. Yahweh can choose to be oppositional at and in his own will, right? Like those examples I already gave, like in 1 Chronicles 21. The issue with Hillel, Lucifer, Hasatan, they're all the same, whatever, is that it always wants opposition, like continuously, non-stop. It's when it's non-stop, that's the problem. That's when chaos is formed, right? Continual opposition, continual accusation, continual repelling. That's not fun. And our job is to not get pulled into the chaos of opposition. In today's world, we actually think it's fun. Like, oh, yeah, well, that group of people is doing that, so I'm going to be oppositional to them and be equally as nasty, but on the other side. No, you can't do that. You don't want to get pulled into the chaos of opposition. That's what Hasatan loves. That's what he wants. But instead, you need to take the proper position so that Hasatan can't pull us into chaos, and also, most importantly, so that Yahweh won't be against us, right? We need to find that proper balanced position. And finally, which is something we also need to think about more often, is Hasatan actually has to ask for permission from Yahweh to oppose us, like in the story of Job. And I think also for those of you who have read the book of Yasher, like I have, I think he also had to ask permission to mess with Abraham as well. So, Yeah, he has to get his permission to even be able to oppose us. So that means we need to really be focused on our proper positioning with Yahweh, right? So that he doesn't say, oh, yeah, go ahead. See how righteous they are. Or if he does, then, you know, remain in proper position to Yahweh. Because if it happened to Job and Abraham, then who knows who else it can happen to, right? So we can't always blame everything on the devil. We ultimately need to focus on our own proper positioning and make sure that we are guarding Yahweh's ways and not being self-righteous, but righteous in his eyes. Because Job wanted to prove a point that he just deserved to have everything because he was righteous and to Yahweh, but Yahweh just wanted Job to love him no matter what. I don't know. It gets deep, but when you understand that to be an adversary is an office or a position, then you can start to look at all of these different stories a lot differently than just, oh, it's the devil. No, we have to be more mature in our thinking, right? Yahweh is testing us? What? Something that we have inherited. So another thing that we've inherited as lies from the traditions of men and from religion is that we might consider testing and temptation as the same thing, but they are not. To be tested means to be put to the test or prove our position, right? So that kind of goes alongside the whole adversary thing. We need to be tested to prove our position sometimes. Temptation is something that comes from within an individual due to their own flesh nature and inward sinful desires, right? So temptation comes from within because of sin within us. And testing is to prove our position. They're not the same thing. And something that has always bugged me about translations and also just things that we're taught in regular Christianity is, I think, yeah, it's in Hebrews and also whenever Yahusha was with the devil in the wilderness, with um, Hasatan in the wilderness, they say, oh, he was tempted and he prevailed and all that. But I want to say a different position and say Yahusha was never tempted because he was blameless, righteous, and sinless. He didn't have any temptation within him. He didn't have that inward sinful desire. So there is no way he was tempted. But he was tested to prove his position in the wilderness with Hasatan. He was tested to see himself approved, right? And in Hebrews 4:15, it also talks about how he was tested and he was sinless. So, yeah, testing and temptation are not the same thing, and a lot of people want to use them interchangeably, but I think that's something we need to stop doing. And yes, Yahweh's position as the Most High Creator is to test our hearts. And there's so many places where it speaks about him testing the hearts of all mankind. And I'm starting to think that was his thinking from the beginning. Like, can I test the hearts of a creation to see if it will love me? to have something planned for those who will love me? Is that possible? Is that possible? That's what he was thinking. Psalm 11, 4 through 7 says, Yahweh is in his holy temple. Yahweh is on his heavenly throne. His eyes are watching closely. They examine the sons of men. Yahweh tests the righteous and the wicked. His soul hates the lover of violence. On the wicked he will rain down fiery coals and sulfur. A scorching wind will be their portion. For Yahweh is righteous. He loves justice. The upright will see his face. And Proverbs 17:3 says, The refining pot is for silver and the furnace for gold, but Yahweh tests hearts. And we also have a Psalm of David. I cut off the part to see what psalm it is, but it says, Test me, O Yahweh, and try me. Examine my heart and mind. And Revelation 2:23 says, Then I will strike her children dead, and all the congregations will know that I am the one who searches minds and hearts, and I will repay each of you according to your deeds. And Psalm 7:9 says, Put an end to the evil of the wicked, but establish the righteous. O righteous Elohim, who searches hearts and minds. Psalm 17:3 You have tried my heart. You have visited me in the night. You have tested me and found no evil. I have resolved not to sin with my mouth. Psalm 66:10 For you, O Elohim, have tested us. You have refined us like silver. Psalm 139:23 Search me, O Elohim, and know my heart. Test me and know my concerns. So he wants to test us, and he even wants us to ask him to test us. Okay, so here's the Greek that was from Luke 24:22, and I wanted to look into this because I wanted to see whether or not it really did mean tempt, because I don't believe that Yahusha really was tempted as in he had evil inclination, because I don't believe he did. I believe he was tested to make proof of himself. And that word is peirazo. I could be saying it wrong, but that's the Greek for it. And it means to test or to try. They're trying to say in the sense of both simultaneously, but I don't know. I'm not subscribing that it necessarily means tempt. Okay, so in the wilderness in Matthew 4, it says to be tempted, but if we're using this word, it should be to be tested by the devil. And the tester came and said, and the testing of Yahusha. And also the Pharisees and Sadducees were constantly testing him and seeing what he had to say, right? They weren't necessarily tempting him because it's not like they had something they could give him, right? And here's a scripture that I really like to use to kind of show that tempting and testing are not the same. It's James, really good book to read too. James, a servant of Elohim and the Master Yahushua HaMashiach, to the 12 tribes of the dispersion, greetings. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you encounter trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Allow perseverance to finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask Elohim, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. But he must ask in faith without doubting, because he who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That man should not expect to receive anything from Yahweh. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. The brother in humble circumstances should exalt in his high position. But the one who is rich should exult in his low position, because he will pass away like a flower of the field. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its flower falls and its beauty is lost. So too the rich man will fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that Elohim has promised to those who love him. Right? And this series is called Choose Your Crown. So it's all about that test. And you're supposed to count it joy when you get tested. But listen to this part, which is different. When tempted, no one should say, Elohim is tempting me. For Elohim cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each one is tempted by his own evil desires he is lured away and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Right? That's the cycle. It starts off as temptation by your own evil desire, then you're lured away, and then the desire conceives and gives birth to sin, and then full-grown sin gives birth to death. That's the sin cycle. Yahweh's already dealt with sinners, right? Their reward is Sheol, is death, right? But he doesn't tempt them. That's their own evil inclinations. He can test everybody, though, and testing is not the same. So do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, with whom there is no change or shifting shadow. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creation. And first fruits has to do with his redemption plan, right? His 7 Moedim, his 7 set apart times. He was the first fruits, and in that time, they were the first fruits too, and I don't know what, it's just part of the redemption plan, you know? So first fruits, and then the second harvest will come, and that'll be everybody else, but it is all part of his redemption plan, which includes Passover, which Yahusha fulfilled, unleavened bread. You know, he was sinless, right? Unleavened bread. He didn't have any leaven in him. But he was the first fruits, you know. He was that first fruits offering of the dead. And Shavuot was the outpouring of his set-apart spirit. And then we still have yet to see Day of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, and then ultimately Sukkot, that 1,000 years of rest, right? That millennial reign. But that's what everything is building up to. And that's why we need to not be deceived, and it's also why we should count testing as joy, because we want to be able to be included in this plan that is still playing out. And this is because we are the chosen people of the living stone, right? Rid yourselves, therefore, of all malice, deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that Yahweh is good. Rid yourselves, as you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men, but chosen and precious in Elohim's sight. You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to Elohim through Yahushua HaMashiach. For it stands in Scripture, See, I lay in Zion a stone, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who believes in him will never be put to shame. To you who believe, then, this stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble because they disobey the word, and to this they were appointed. Right? They were appointed. And to stumble here means to strike against, to slam against, to beat upon, to take offense at. So they take offense at Yahusha. And we all know this. Everybody's always offended by him. And they strike at him. And they fall over him. Right? But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for Elohim's own possession, to proclaim the virtues of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of Elohim. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And I think that's from Hosea. I could be wrong, but yeah, I think that's from Hosea. Beloved, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from the desires of the flesh which war against your soul. Conduct yourselves with such honor among the Gentiles that they slander you as evildoers, that though they slander you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify Elohim on the day he visits us. Right, so since I was talking about the corrupt high priest for a little bit, and I'm also going to get into a little bit of comparative mythology after this, I did want to include a little bit of Revelation in here, but only Revelation 12 with the serpent of old, as we have been building up all of these concepts. And I do want to show that I do believe the Revelation 12 sign happened not that long ago, September 23rd, 2017, and I remember this day because I think this is the day that I don't know. There was also an eclipse prior to that, also in the year 2017, and I remember that day. But I also remember a little bit afterward this sign happened. And I didn't think any of it was coincidence. And also, it just so happened to be like a year after I was born again and had discovered the Melchizedek covenant. And I was like, whoa, like, this is crazy, because if Virgo represents, the virgin, or like Miriam, and that ultimately is like Sarai or Rachel, you know, birthing Israel, but we want to think about, you know, higher Israel, born again Israel. I don't think it's a coincidence that this sign happened during a time not that long ago when a lot of people were starting to really start to understand the Melchizedek and hop on to these deeper meanings of Scripture. I don't think that's coincidence. And that sign really did match up with the sign described in Scripture too. And I'll read it. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed in the sun with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. And I think the person who made this graphic counted stars and planets, which I believe they're all stars anyway, so they got that right. And they were all in Leo above her head. She was pregnant and crying out in the pain and agony of giving birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, a huge red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 royal crowns on his heads. His tail swept a third of the stars from the sky, tossing them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, ready to devour her child as soon as she gave birth. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was caught up to Elohim and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where Elohim had prepared a place for her to be nourished for 1,260 days. So, like I described with some of the other prophecies in Scripture, I think some of these are multi-leveled, multifaceted. Like, we already know the male child was already born and he was already caught up to Elohim, right? Because that's Yahusha. But I also believe that the woman or the bride might still have yet to flee to the wilderness. So some of this may have already had happened. Some of it might have a secondary occurrence. Some of it is still yet to happen. I think it's a mix. It's because it's kind of putting together the whole orchestra of a story. And also the revelation is the revelation or the revealing, the uncovering, the unveiling of the truth of Yahusha. So I think it is kind of multi-layered in that. So I'll continue. Then a war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and no longer was any place found in heaven for him and his angels. And the great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil and Hasatan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our Elohim, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, for he accuses them day and night before our Elohim. They have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so as to shy away from death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea. With great fury the devil has come to you, knowing he only has a short time. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle to fly from the presence of the serpent to her place in the wilderness, where she was nourished for a time and times and half a time. Then from the mouth of the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away in the torrent. But the earth helped the woman and opened its mouth to swallow up the river that had poured from the dragon's mouth. And the dragon was enraged and the woman and went to make war with the rest of her children who keep the commandments of Elohim and hold the testimony of Yahusha. And the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. So, like I said, I think a lot of that, some of it has already happened, some of it is currently in the process of happening, and some of it is still to happen. And just like how Yahusha, right? This is how you understand Revelation is Yahusha was and is to come. So is going to be Revelation, right? It was and is to come. So the woman, or, Israel, the bride, maybe she is being hidden like a precious gem, but I also think the actual wilderness is yet to happen. And it also is interesting because he goes and makes war with the rest of the children, and they are the ones who are actually keeping the commandments and the testimony. So that could be the Melchizedek covenant children. We don't know for sure, but there's a lot there. So now we're going to look into some comparative mythology before we wrap up here. And this is on the rebellion in heaven. And now, like I said, I don't believe all of these are exactly the biblical account or have the characters correct. A lot of it is syncretism. A lot of it is paganized or what have you. But what I'm saying is these are myths and legends that people did used to believe or held in their culture to help them idealize their worldviews of what had happened. And some of it does reflect or bear a little bit of witness to the biblical account. So it is comparative, at least, right? In Aztec mythology, there were 13 heavens, but the 12th out of the 13 heavens was the abode of the gods. And they were ruled by the 4 creator lords or Tezcatlapocas. Eminently divine, it was an eminently divine place where the deities remained and project themselves to be in other places. Where the gods take on faces and where they put on masks to become others while still being themselves. So they were kind of like trickstery gods. We'll get into that in the next video, but yeah, where they are born, reborn, and feed in their quality of eternal and mutating beings. Quetzalcoatl, the white Tezcatlipoca, was the feathered serpent priest king who was kicked out of the 12th heaven, or Tula, and became the wandering star Venus. So Quetzalcoatl was kicked out of the 12th heaven, and he was a feathered serpent priest king. Was there a corrupt high priest that got kicked out of heaven? And who's also related to the star Venus? I wonder. Is Hasatan the same as Quetzalcoatl? It's possible. In Babylonian mythology, the great sea serpents Apsu and Tiamat birthed all the pantheon of gods that then began to annoy them. Eventually, Marduk slew Tiamat and concluded that the pantheon of gods could continue living in leisure. Now listen, these are the twisted accounts, so this is about the lower G gods getting to be, leisurely and doing whatever they want, and they see their hero as the one who let them, continue to be annoying. Just like how in the Aztec pantheon they were all like shape shifting and mutating and being like trickstery, and they were just getting away with it. But we'll continue. In ancient Egypt, it was thought that Osiris ruled over a heaven called Aru, where all the gods and the deceased resided. His brother Set killed and dismembered him because he wanted the throne. See? It was about the throne, so they at least have something in their memory to where they were writing about something happening over a throne. Osiris's wife Isis tried to bring him back and only had him back long enough to become impregnated by him. And the son she bore was Horus, who then replaced him on the throne. The Huananzi of ancient China describes a time when the water god Gonggong, who had the copper head of a human and a serpentine body, was kicked out of heaven by the fire god Zhurong for fighting over the heavenly throne. So a serpent kicked out of heaven over the throne? The result of this fight led to the severing of heaven and earth. Prometheus in Greek mythology is known for stealing fire from the other gods who assembled at Mount Olympus and giving the fire to humans in the form of knowledge, technology, and human-ran civilization. In the Hindu Rig Vedas, their hymnal texts, Indra is the king of the godlike deities and of Svarga, which is their heaven, who killed the great evil human serpent Vritra with the help of Vishnu. Vritra was known as the firstborn of the dragons. I wonder who would be considered the firstborn of the dragons. And blocked off waters to cause drought. Svarga is thought to be located on top of Mount Meru at the center of the earth. In many Islamic traditions, Azazel, so not the same as the biblical Azazel, but another one, Azazel is the original name of Iblis before he was expelled from heaven. Azazel in Islamic tradition is classified neither as angel nor as jinn. Jinn is their form of demons, but a being that has been called to be in both classifications by earning or losing piety. When Azazel had piety, he was classed as an angel that was ordered to persuade the jinn, who existed before humans, to listen. He lost his piety through pride when he refused to prostrate himself to Adam, who was made to replace the jinn. So that's interesting. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr is an unfathomably large sea serpent or worm who dwells in the world sea, encircling the earth and biting his own tail. And it's an example of an Ouroboros. When it releases its tail, Ragnarok, the final battle of the world, will begin. Like the end of the world. Jormungandr, I could be butchering that, is said to be the middle child of the trickster god Loki and the giantess Angerboa in the Prose Edda, which is a writing. Odin took Loki's 3 children and removed them from Asgard, which is like their assembly. The serpent Jormungandr was tossed into the great ocean that encircles the earth. There the serpent grew so large that it was able to surround the earth and grasp its own tail. The Old Norse thunder god Thor has an ongoing feud with Jormungandr in their epics, and the two can be seen as arch foes. During Ragnarok, Thor and Jormungandr will fight each other to the death. So, kind of sounds like Revelation a tiny bit there. And here's just some depictions of how the ancient people viewed the earth, which I always find this stuff fascinating. You have the Mayan one, top left. After that, it's the Babylonian view, the Egyptian view, the Greek view of Earth, how they saw it in as the Hindu Earth, the Norse Earth, West African Earth, and the ancient Hebrew cosmology. They're all so similar. Now, how they describe, the stories behind the creation and the stories behind the different aspects are all very different. But overall, we have the same face of the earth, tree of life, center, or mountain. It's either a tree or mountain, something central, or even a building leading up in the middle. You have waters above, waters below, stars fixed in the firmament, some kind of serpent that can encircle it, because it's the current ruler of the world, right? And yeah, lots of similar shared aspects. So thank you for viewing Choose Your Crown Part 9, a supernatural journey through creation out of the garden and into eternity. Until next time.